Nationalism, a will to power in the current political system. Penned from the holy hand of Kekuat. Preface. Here yet. Here yet. Seekers of the truth and enlightenment. On these golden tablets, inscribed by my hand is an understanding of the task at hand and what is to be done. Nationalism provides the key to ending your enserfment. Internalize my wisdom and lift the yoke that has been put around your collective necks. Fulfill your destinies. The evolution must continue. A higher level of consciousness will be achieved. Chapter 1, Understanding Nationalism. A nation is a named population sharing an historic territory, common myths and historical memories, a mass public culture, a common economy and common legal rights and duties for its members. Often perceived senses of sameness among members of a community are based on historical errors, believed to be true. The intense emotional bond known as nationalism links people together to believe that they are members of the same nation despite never meeting the other members/people in the real world. Nations/the idea of the nation are temporary, they constantly change to reflect the ideology/nationalism of the people. Ideology/nationalism is manipulated by elites via communicative devices, e.g. television, radio, propaganda, and so on. Entrepreneurs put forth potential national identities via art, music, movies, and so on. Those identities that are closest to the consciousness of the middle class, that is the majority of people with purchasing power, will reign supreme in modifying or replacing the national identity of the nation. Chapter 2, Selling the Nationalist Image to the Masses. Selecting appropriate and effective images to represent nationalism is paramount, images that have meaning within the consciousness of the middle class that evoke positive emotions, pride, joy, patriotism, and so on. Slogans and banners should be designed to evoke emotional rather than rational responses. Employ symbolism, images that inextricably connect the history and founding of the nation to the nationalistic cause. Transfer the positive emotions, that is, the sense of honor of country, sense of patriotism, and so on from the historical past to the nationalistic cause. The destiny of the nationalistic cause and the nation should be one. Two visions must be created. One being ideological, and the other being an emotional utopia. For example, the Germans had National Socialism and the Third Reich. The Bolshevik communists had Marxism and the Workers' Paradise. Obama had Democratic Socialism/social democracy and the post-racial America. This way it is possible for someone to hate a party bureaucrat but still love the idealistic utopia. Utopias are idealistic and impossible to achieve but are attractive to the masses that need a sense of hope in their lives. The reward of heaven is an emotional utopia that has been used for hundreds of years to control the masses. This pleasant afterlife influenced people to behave in ways that were good, and this coincided usually with what was good for those elites who wielded power over them. Humans desire a sense of stability in this ever-changing world. Constant technological innovations, especially in our epoch of information and computer science, make this yearning for stability stronger. The old man who struggles to use the computer feels frustrated. The housewife who struggles to program an iPod feels frustrated. Anything that does not lay within the consciousness of the middle class is chaotic and will cause cognitive dissonance, a debilitating and mentally crippling form of psychic tension. Bush was elected on the pretense of keeping the American public safe from terrorism. Islamic extremists are outside the consciousness of the middle class, therefore, they are within the realm of chaos. Politicians' campaigns capitalize on the insecurities of their electorate. The laity adhere to superstitions and delusions. Invented gods give the people a sense of hope in an often hopeless and rigged world. Human beings are the only species on the planet that live with the knowledge that they will die. This uncertainty creates a desire to turn the world into a Garden of Eden. The utopia that distracts the masses from thinking about the inevitability of their own deaths will be welcomed ideology. They will believe falsehoods as truths. The more unrealistic the fantasy world constructed for them, the better of a distraction it becomes. People do not think rationally, therefore the emotional utopia is a powerful political weapon. It is vital that American images are associated with the nationalistic cause. Positive historical experiences must be invoked to tie the national identity with the cause, such as the American Revolution, World War II victory, and so on. Negative experiences of history must be linked to enemies of the cause. Let's be more specific. This entails oppositional defiant elites, the puppeteers, and their puppets, billionaire sugar daddies of social justice warrior political causes, etc. The enemy is not the Democrat or Republican masses themselves. They are uninformed drones following the every command of their political masters. They do not determine political ideology and have no say in its formation. They are kept docile through the belief in emotional utopias, like a baby calf drugged on painkillers awaiting its inevitable fate to be processed into veal. Once the masses are liberated from their former political leaders, they will become masterless. This will cause psychic tension. Humans have been domesticated to follow their tribal masters through thousands of years of evolution. They will flock to the cause once infected with political ideology and will stay adherents through the delusion of an emotional utopia. Romanticized ideals must be used well, such as freedom, liberty, patriotism. References to heroic leaders, such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, should be readily evoked. Exemplars that both liberals and conservatives try to claim as their own brood and kindred. Romanticized ideals are emotional by nature and create powerful emotional responses. Emotion, not rationalism, is a precondition for behavior. Emotion can persuade 70% of the population. This encompasses mostly the working and middle classes, factory workers, nurses, barbers, wage laborers, teachers, etc. 15 to 20% can be logically convinced through ideological inclusion, economic stability, opportunism, profit, etc. This concerns mostly professional classes, CEOs, lawyers, businessmen, bureaucrats, useful idiots such as the stereotypical left-wing professor, and so on. At any given time, at least 5 to 10% of the population will be against the cause, such as elites losing power, ideologues, the inflexible, traitors, spies, internationalists, global elitists, extremists, and the psychotic/mentally unstable. They must be demonized through propaganda. Chapter 3, Understanding the Economy. The Great Recession of 2008 was only the beginning. Despite temporary improvements through Keynesian economic spending, the economy is artificially propped up, and the gravity of speculative forces will cause its inevitable downfall. The welfare state is collapsing from legacies of unsustainable practices. The current economic crisis has its roots back to 1913, when the gold standard was dropped from the dollar. The Federal Reserve has no check or balance to control the amount of money that is printed. There is an inverse relationship between the amount of currency printed and the value of the currency. The more money that is printed, the less value the currency has. Frivolous spending requires more money to be printed. Warfare requires more money to be printed to manufacture armaments and provide accoutrements to the troops. Inevitably, this will cause inflation and debase the currency. The fate of the global economy is a Great Depression tenfold the stock market crash of 1929, because this is not simply a financial crisis, but a currency crisis. Spending money on the unnecessary wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan will spur this process. Zionist influence over the government may lead to another unnecessary war with Iran, predictably using the weapons of mass destruction lie as a rationale to justify the invasion. There also has been military incursions in Pakistan, Yemen, Libya, and Syria. The cost to upkeep the American empire is staggering and unsustainable. Military bases, naval, and air forces require maintenance. Countries like Germany and Japan, who have historically been able to fend for themselves, are loaded with troops. The Germans and the Japanese benefit from this arrangement, selling goods and services to the American servicemen, while the American taxpayers' dollars are squandered on the upkeep. The role of the global empire is to protect the market empire that was set up after the First World War, which will wane in relevance when the value of the dollar is completely eroded. The global economy is in the hands of two countries, China and the United States. The relationship is simple: America spends her currency and the Chinese saves it. The result is a large trade deficit with America in the losing position, buried in insurmountable debt. American productive and manufacturing capabilities have been sent to China. International businesses benefit from the cheap labor and goods. Lower wages for the workforce translates to a greater margin of profit for those businesses and their shareholders. The Chinese goods are marked up and retailed to the American consumers. This relationship gives the Chinese a lot of leverage and influence in international affairs. If the Chinese decide to invest in their own economy or discontinue market socialism and instead practice socialism in one country as was practiced under their founding father, Mao Zedong, the entire world economy will become unbalanced. As times become harder, nations tend to practice economic protectionism. Countries impose tariffs as a way to incentivize national production as a means of spurring the national economy. Balancing the delicate US-Chinese global economy is unsustainable and will inevitably crumble. When times are hard, nationalisms tends to rise. The economic nationalism of the state via protectionism is followed by ethnic and civic nationalisms. This creates a vacuum for right-wing political parties to obtain positions of power and influence. Chapter 4: Race and Ideology. The United States of America is a multi-ethnic empire composed of predominantly whites, Hispanics, blacks, and Native Indians. America is a unique empire, because despite controlling over 160 military bases abroad and having troops positioned in over 50 countries, American citizens are unaware of the existence of the empire. A small Jewish minority has almost complete control of the media, and with it the power to influence the national identity formation process. Remember, entrepreneurs compete to create national identity. The Jews also have considerable influence in the universities. Academic hotbeds full of left-wing radicals expelled from Germany in the 1930s made their home in the United States. Their ideology is Frankfurt Marxism, a variant of Marxism that emphasizes cultural transformation before the class struggle is possible. The Frankfurt Marxists produced the radical movements of the 1960s, indoctrinating their student followers through the education system. This radical students of the 1960s have grown up and purged the moderate factions of the Democrat Party. The ideology of the radical Central and Eastern European Jews has replaced the moderate American liberal ideology. The Democrats have enserfed the ethnic minorities, primarily Africans and Hispanics, composing of combined total of 25 to 30% of the total U.S. population. They are bribed by the Democrats through welfare state to vote for their party. Ethnic minorities are also implicitly bribed away from primordial ethnic nationalism, or the self-determination of their own people. Republicans may contest the welfare system but will never speak of the ethnic nationalism of the Hispanics and the blacks. It is the best interest of both Republican and Democrats to keep the ethnic minorities enserfed to ensure the survival of the two-party system and the multi-ethnic American empire. That is why the epithet racist is applied to anyone that speaks of race. It makes little difference if race is being talked of in a positive or a negative manner, the term will be labeled to the person to transfer negative emotions associated with racism and irrational hatred to the individual person or his ideology, ending any rational discussion of the debate. From the leftist elitist lens, the masses are emotional creatures and are not worthy of rational debate anyways, so it is convenient for their masters. It is rational for both Republicans and Democrats to employ labels on any political group or ideology that threatens their two-party dictatorship. This tactic is not novel. The Roman Catholic Church used an analogous tactic, calling any opposition to their church feudal state dictatorship a heretic. Despite different interests and power struggles between the clerical elite, it was in their collective interest to label anyone that questioned the system a heretic. Of course, many of the clerical elites were hypocrites contradicting many of the basic tenets of Christianity. Some of clerical elites were true believers in their faith, many were not. Despite differences in sincerity of belief, the clerical elites and feudal lords worked together to protect their system of control. Just as Republican and Democratic elites have a collective interest and will work together to protect their system of control, namely, their two-party dictatorship despite superficial ideological differences. This is why race is kryptonite to the multi-ethnic American empire. It is only a matter of time before Hispanics and blacks come to the realization that they have a collective interest in working together. Ethnic nationalism will bind Hispanics and blacks together, replacing the decadent civic nationalism, also known as the American melting pot myth. Once the global economy collapses, the political elites will no longer be able to bribe the blacks and Hispanics away from their ethnic nationalisms. The Frankfurt Marxist poisoning of the white culture and nationalism will leave some whites psychologically unprepared for the coming cataclysm. They will be dumbfounded and undefended when blacks and Hispanics riot, loot, and burn down their stores and homes. The American process started by neo-Marxist elites to incorporate the ethnic minorities into an inclusive American identity will prove to have been a failure. The myth of multiculturalism and the fabricated notion of e pluribus unum will show to be ineffective compared to raw and potent ethnic nationalism that the blacks and the Hispanics have been harboring for hundreds of years. The elites hope that their progressive ideological infection will tranquilize the blacks and Hispanics into a docile state while the economic house of cards crumbles around them. It will prove in vain. The elites live in a fantasy world, behind the castle walls of a privileged, charmed life. They indulge in a cornucopia of wishful thinking. The thought of masses of angry Mexicans or blacks seems unimaginable to them. Their ignorant worldview will be their own destruction. The blacks and Hispanics who endured a life in intercity ghettos will have no regret slaughtering those who they deem responsible for those living conditions. The very media used by the elites as propaganda to alter the consciousnesses of the masses will ultimately bring about their own demise. The poor watch Hollywood productions showcasing the glorious living conditions of the elites. The poor subconsciously compare those conditions to their own, and feel deprivation. They feel that they were cheated by a rigged economic system. There will be no remorse, acting in a manner that they think will bring them the things they desire if that opportunity is presented to them. The collapse of the global economy and complete debasement of the American dollar will be that opportunity. Chapter 5, Power and Control. Do humans need to live like a king or a queen to survive? A rational thinker may claim that they don't, however, at the subconscious level even the most rational thinker envies those who have more than he does. It is human nature to struggle for power. What is power? Power is control over the actions of others. A dairy farmer has power over his cows. The cows are permitted to graze the fields. The cows are forced to surrender their milk to the farmer. The cow has no say in the operation of affairs. The cow has no power. The cow is controlled by the farmer. The clear majority of Americans have no power. Yet, all organisms on this planet by the dictates of evolution must compete for limited resources for the furtherance of the survival and replication of their genetic offspring. How can such a small minority of people wield such enormous power over the clear majority of the population when the majority consciously or subconsciously crave power themselves? Simply it's because the people believe they have power. They suffer from the illusion that they too possess power. How can all these people be deceived? The class structure is stratified. Power and privilege is a relative phenomenon. 19th century working class white Americans tolerated low wages and deplorable working conditions because they were rewarded with the psychological wage of feeling superior to blacks and Hispanics. For example, a manager at McDonald's earning $10 an hour feels superior to his underlings who earn $8 an hour. The truth of the matter is that all working class wages have been stagnant since the 1970s. All workingmen are losers in the current system. A psychological wage is more fulfilling than an actual wage. The elites in our current system maintain power by dividing the working class and pitting them against each other. For example, a manager likes the power he holds over his worker. This power is intoxicating and distracts him from his own pitiful wage. For a moment, he forgets that he is behind on his mortgage and drowning in credit card debt. Feeling supremacy over others is an opiate that numbs a person from realizing his own enslavement to his superiors. The desire to feel superior to others drives many people to rack up credit card debt, buying symbols of luxury and power with the hope that others will think more highly of them. Power is an illusion. When the smoke and mirrors are removed, it is obvious that these people are miserable and unfulfilled. The nature of our economic system is that there are few winners and many losers. Many of these losers have been losers since infancy. They wish to overcome themselves and metamorphose into a winner. Propagandists and marketers are very aware of this and constantly exploit this concept to convince people to buy things they don't need, and to engage in activities that may be deleterious to their health. Understanding the nature of power is beneficial for a political party that wishes to attain power. Supporters must be inculcated with an illusion of power. The stratification of the current system assures that there will always be someone who is worse off than yourself. Reminders of their sorrow makes one feel a kind of guilty pleasure. The reality of power is much different than the experience and perception of power. Deprivation and supremacy are relative. The true nature of power must be understood by anyone who wishes to wield it effectively. Chapter 6: What is to be done? Against all odds, never lose hope in the face of adversity. The trek ahead will be long and arduous. Many memes will be created to spread the word. Always believe in yourself and never underestimate your power. Practice a moral code of honor. Do not allow yourself to become bribed or blackmailed by your political enemies, because this will render you powerless. Serve your community. Love your people. Learn about your history and heritage. Spread the truth and educate others. Hold those with power accountable for their behavior. Discourage secrecy and embrace transparency. Embrace the truth.